I uncovered a riddle carved into my grandfather's cane, and the answer explained why his will was just a distraction. When Grandpa died last month, the family vultures descended faster than I could process my grief. His funeral wasn't even over before my Aunt Bernice cornered me in the cemetery parking lot, mascara streaking down her cheeks in what I knew were calculated tears. "It's just tragic how he left everything to that children's hospital," she sobbed dramatically. $73 million to strangers while his own blood gets nothing. Uncle Clifford nodded gravely behind her, though I'd heard him on the phone earlier complaining about having to buy his own lunch after the service. The will reading had been brutal. Grandpa's entire fortune donated to charity, his mansion sold, even his cars given away. All that remained for family were a few sentimental items. I got his walking cane. Everyone thought it was worthless. Bernice actually laughed when the lawyer handed it to me, a hand-carved wooden stick with an ornate silver handle shaped like a raven's head. "At least someone got something useful," she sneered. That night, alone in my tiny studio apartment, I really looked at it for the first time. The wood was darker than I remembered, worn smooth by decades of Grandpa's hands. But as I traced my fingers along the shaft, I felt something strange, tiny ridges that seemed intentional. I grabbed my desk lamp and angled it carefully. There, carved so subtly they were nearly invisible, were letters and symbols etched into the wood in a spiraling pattern. My heart started racing. I'd spent summers with Grandpa solving puzzles and riddles. He'd always said I had the sharpest mind in the family, that someday I'd need to use it for something important. Those summers felt like a lifetime ago now. I was 8 when Mom first dropped me off at his estate for 2 weeks while she dealt with her divorce. Grandpa had seemed ancient to me then, this tall man with silver hair who walked with a carved stick and kept pet ravens in a huge aviary behind his house. But he'd treated me like an adult from day one. While other grandparents might have put on cartoons or bought me toys, Grandpa introduced me to chess, cryptography, and logic puzzles. We'd spend hours in his library working through riddles he'd collected from around the world. "The mind is a muscle," he'd tell me, moving a chess piece. "Most people let it go soft. But you, Catherine, you have something special up there. Promise me you'll never stop exercising it." I'd promised, not understanding then that he was preparing me for something far more serious than childhood games. I spent hours transcribing every mark on the cane. The carvings formed words when read in sequence. "Where ravens rest and memories keep, past the garden's thorny sweep, 7 stones mark sacred ground. What was lost shall now be found." Below that, a series of numbers, 47.6372, 1174265, coordinates. I Googled them immediately. They pointed to a location in Spokane, Washington, exactly where Grandpa's old estate was located. The mansion I'd visited every summer as a child, now supposedly empty and scheduled for demolition next week. But why hide coordinates to his own property in a riddle? Unless... My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop looking. Some secrets should stay buried. This is your only warning." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Someone else knew about the cane. Someone who didn't want me to solve Grandpa's puzzle. The threatening text made everything click into place. The will had seemed wrong from the beginning. Not just the amount, but Grandpa's complete exclusion of family. He'd always been generous with us, paying for my college tuition, helping with Mom's medical bills when she got sick. The idea that he'd leave everything to strangers while his own granddaughter struggled with student loans didn't match the man I knew. I grabbed my car keys. If someone was threatening me, it meant I was onto something big, something worth protecting, something that made a $73 million donation look like pocket change. The drive to Spokane took 14 hours. I barely stopped, surviving on gas station coffee and adrenaline. My mind kept returning to those summers at Grandpa's house, searching for clues I might have missed as a child. I remembered how carefully he'd maintained the aviary, spending hours each day with his ravens. "They're intelligent birds," he'd explained when I asked why he kept them. "Loyal. They remember faces, hold grudges, and reward kindness. Most importantly, they always return home." Now I wondered if there had been deeper meaning in those words. By the time I reached Grandpa's estate, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown gardens. The mansion looked abandoned, just as the lawyers had described. Windows were boarded up and weeds had taken over the once pristine landscaping, but I knew where the ravens rested. Grandpa's old aviary behind the rose garden, where he'd kept his beloved pet ravens for decades. As I walked through the tangled garden, memories flooded back. Grandpa teaching me the names of different rose varieties. The two of us sitting under the old oak tree while his ravens perched nearby, their black eyes watching everything. I found the 7 stones easily. They formed a perfect circle around the oak tree where Grandpa used to sit and watch his birds. But these weren't ordinary garden stones. They were granite markers, each about 2 feet tall, arranged with mathematical precision. The arrangement looked random until I remembered another lesson from those childhood summers. Grandpa had taught me about ancient stone circles, how they were often aligned with astronomical events or used as primitive calendars. I started digging at the center point. 3 feet down, my shovel hit something hard. Metal. I cleared away the dirt with shaking hands, revealing a large steel box with an electronic lock. The display showed a blinking cursor, waiting for a code. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. "I told you to stop looking." I spun around to find a man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit despite the mud and darkness. His face was familiar, but I couldn't place him immediately. "Who are you?" I demanded, gripping the shovel tighter. "Someone who's been protecting your grandfather's secrets for 30 years. My name is Garrison Thorne. I was his business partner and closest friend." He stepped closer, hands raised peacefully. "And if you open that box, you'll destroy everything he died to protect." The name triggered a memory. Garrison had been at the funeral, sitting in the back. I'd assumed he was just another business associate paying respects. Protect from who? My own family? Garrison's laugh was bitter. Especially your family. Do you really think your grandfather would leave $73 million to charity if he didn't have a damn good reason? I stared at him, my mind racing. The will was fake. A distraction. Not fake. Legally binding and absolutely necessary. Garrison sat heavily on one of the stone markers, suddenly looking exhausted. Your grandfather discovered something about your family that changed everything. Something so dangerous he spent the last 5 years of his life creating an elaborate plan to protect you. Protect me from what? Garrison pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. It was my Uncle Clifford shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize, standing in front of what looked like a warehouse. Your uncle has been laundering money through your grandfather's businesses for 15 years. Drug money, human trafficking proceeds, weapons deals, millions of dollars in blood money flowing through legitimate companies. Garrison swiped to another photo. Your Aunt Bernice isn't just his accomplice. She's been running the operation. My legs gave out. I sank to the ground staring at the images. That's impossible. They're greedy, sure, but they're not criminals. Your grandfather thought the same thing until he hired a forensic accountant to investigate some irregularities. When the truth came out, he realized they'd been using him as an unwitting front for years. Garrison's voice grew hard. They killed the accountant, made it look like a heart attack. Your grandfather knew he was next. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I thought about all the family dinners, the holiday gatherings, the way Bernice and Clifford had always seemed so concerned about Grandpa's business decisions. They hadn't been worried about him. They'd been protecting their criminal empire. Marcus Whitley, I whispered, remembering the accountant's name from news reports. The police said he died of natural causes. Induced heart attack. Untraceable poison that mimics cardiac arrest. Your family has connections to people who specialize in that kind of work. Garrison's expression was grim. Marcus had discovered bank records showing regular transfers from known criminal organizations. He was going to the FBI the next day. Why didn't Grandpa go to the police? Because they had compromised half the police department and 3 judges. The corruption runs deep, and your family sits at the center of it. Garrison gestured to the box in the hole. So he created this. A failsafe. Evidence that could bring down the entire network, hidden where only you could find it. Why me? Because you're the only one in the family who isn't dirty. You never showed interest in the business. Never asked for money. Never got involved in their scheme. You were the only one he trusted. Garrison's expression softened. And because you're the only one smart enough to solve his riddles. I stared at the electronic lock, remembering more details from those childhood summers. Grandpa had always been secretive about his business dealings, keeping his study locked and taking important calls in private. I'd assumed it was normal executive behavior, but now I wondered what he'd been hiding, or trying to protect us from. What's the code? That's where it gets complicated. Your grandfather designed a security system that requires 3 separate codes, entered in sequence. Each code corresponds to a different location, and you have to physically be at each location to enter it. Where are the other locations? Garrison pulled out a worn piece of paper. The second location is your grandfather's old study at the university where he taught. The third is the cemetery where your grandmother is buried. But here's the problem. Your family figured out you found something. They're already watching both locations. As if summoned by his words, car headlights swept across the garden. We both froze as the rumble of multiple engines grew louder. How did they find us? I whispered. Garrison's face went pale. They must have put a tracker on your car. Or, his eyes widened in horror. The text message. It wasn't a warning. It was a way to trace your phone. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the mansion. Car doors slammed, and I heard voices calling out commands. My Aunt Bernice's voice cut through the night. Fan out. She's here somewhere. The sound of her voice, no longer the grief-stricken mourner from the funeral but cold and commanding, sent chills down my spine. How long had she been wearing a mask around me? How many family dinners had I sat through while she planned criminal activities? What do we do? I grabbed the steel box, trying to lift it, but it weighed at least 50 pounds. Leave it. The first code has to be entered here anyway. Garrison helped me cover the hole with loose dirt and branches. We need to get out of here and regroup. But as we turned to flee, floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the entire garden. We were surrounded. Bernice stepped into the light. No longer the grief-stricken sister from the funeral. Her face was cold, calculating, and I realized I was seeing her true self for the first time. Hello, sweetheart. I think you have something that belongs to the family. Uncle Clifford emerged from behind her, flanked by 4 men in tactical gear. These weren't private security guards. They moved with military precision, and their weapons were professional grade. Dad always said you were too smart for your own good, kiddo. Should have minded your own business. The casual way he called Grandpa Dad, while ordering armed men to threaten me, was sickening. How long had they been planning to eliminate anyone who got in their way? This is her grandfather's property, Garrison said, stepping protectively in front of me. She has every right to be here. Bernice smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Actually, the property transfers to the hospital tomorrow. Tonight, we're just cleaning up loose ends. One of the armed men raised his weapon. Where's the box? My mind raced. The code system Garrison had described meant the evidence was useless without accessing all 3 locations in sequence. If I died here, Grandpa's plan died with me. It's not here, I lied. This was just the first clue. The actual treasure is somewhere else. Clifford's face darkened. Don't play games with us. We know Dad hid something here. We've been watching you solve his stupid riddles. How long have you been watching me? Since the funeral, Bernice said. We had to make sure you didn't find anything that could complicate our business arrangements. The casual admission sent ice through my veins. While I'd been grieving, they'd been spying on me, waiting to see if I'd pose a threat to their operation. "We put surveillance on your apartment 2 weeks ago," Clifford added. "Camera in the hallway, tracker on your car, monitoring software on your phone. We know about every Google search you've made, every text you've sent." That's when I understood. The charity donation wasn't just a cover. It was a way to transfer the property legally while giving me time to find the evidence. Grandpa had anticipated this confrontation. "You killed him," I said quietly. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Bernice shrugged. Dad was going senile, started asking too many questions, threatening to involve the authorities. We helped him along. The matter-of-fact way she discussed murdering her own father made my stomach turn. "How?" "Same method we used on the accountant. Clean, efficient, looks natural." Clifford checked his watch. "We're on a schedule here. Sunrise brings construction crews and cops. Tell us where the evidence is or this gets messy." Rage flooded through me, hot and pure. He trusted you. He was naive. Money doesn't care about blood relations. Clifford gestured to his men. "Dig up that circle. Find whatever she buried." As the armed men moved toward the oak tree, I noticed something they'd missed. The stones weren't just markers. They were positioned to create shadows in the moonlight, shadows that pointed to specific numbers carved into the tree bark. The first code. While everyone's attention was on the digging, I memorized the sequence. 0072848. Grandpa's birthday, July 28, 1948. It was so like him to make the first code something personal, something only family would know. He'd always celebrated his birthday quietly, usually just the two of us sharing cake in his library while he told stories about his childhood. "There's nothing here," one of the men called out. "Just empty dirt." Bernice's eyes narrowed. "Where is it?" "I told you this was just the first clue." I tried to keep my voice steady. "The real hiding place is encoded in the riddle. I need time to work it out." "You have until sunrise," Clifford said. "Find it or we start removing fingers." They zip-tied my hands and led me back to the mansion, leaving 2 guards to continue searching the garden. Garrison was unconscious, a purple bruise spreading across his temple where one of the men had hit him. Inside the mansion, they locked me in Grandpa's old library. The room was exactly as I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the old leather chair where he'd read me stories, his chess set still arranged on the side table. But now I noticed details I'd missed as a child. Hidden compartments in the desk, books that weren't quite flush with the others on the shelves. A portrait of Grandma that hung slightly crooked. The chess set caught my attention. The pieces were arranged in a specific pattern that didn't match any normal game position. It was another puzzle. White king on e1, black queen on d8, rooks positioned to create specific angles. I'd seen this configuration before. Grandpa had shown me this exact setup during one of our lessons, calling it the sacrifice gambit. The solution required sacrificing your most powerful piece to protect the king, just like he'd sacrificed his entire public fortune to protect me. I straightened the portrait and found a hidden safe behind it. The digital lock was identical to the one on the buried box. I entered the code I'd memorized, 072848. The safe clicked open. Inside was a letter in Grandpa's handwriting. "My dearest granddaughter, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Your aunt and uncle have shown their true colors, and you're in mortal danger. The evidence in the buried box contains financial records, recorded conversations, and video surveillance that proves their involvement in multiple criminal enterprises. But the most damaging evidence is hidden in plain sight, in my will. The charity I donated to doesn't exist. It's a shell company I created to expose their money laundering network. When the donation fails to process, it will trigger an automatic investigation by the FBI, who have been building a case against them for 2 years. The 3-code system was designed to buy you time and keep you safe. Each location contains additional evidence and instructions. But if you're in immediate danger, there's an emergency protocol. Behind the 3rd bookshelf from the left, press the leather spine of Paradise Lost. It will open a passage to the underground tunnel system I had installed during the Cold War. Follow the tunnel north for half a mile. It emerges in the woods behind the Riverside Cemetery, near your grandmother's grave. In the mausoleum next to hers, you'll find everything you need: new identity documents, cash, and a direct line to FBI agent Patricia Vance, who has been coordinating with me for months. Trust no one else. Your family's corruption runs deeper than you can imagine. I love you more than words can express. Use that brilliant mind of yours to survive. Grandpa. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Dawn was still hours away, but I couldn't wait any longer. The tunnel system explained so much about Grandpa's behavior over the years. His insistence on renovating the basement for storage, the way he'd sometimes disappear for hours without explanation. He'd been building an escape route, preparing for the day when his criminal family would turn on him. I found the book he'd mentioned and pressed the spine. A section of the bookshelf swung inward, revealing a narrow stone tunnel lit by emergency lighting. As I crawled into the passage, I heard the library door crash open behind me. "She's gone," Bernice's voice echoed through the hidden opening. "Find her." The tunnel was cramped and cold, but Grandpa had maintained it well. Emergency supplies were stocked every 100 yards. Water, blankets, first aid kits, even a change of clothes. He'd really been planning for this scenario. The walls were lined with photographs and documents, evidence he'd been collecting for years. Pictures of Bernice meeting with known drug dealers, financial records showing Clifford's involvement in human trafficking, audio transcripts of phone calls discussing bribes and murders. The scope of their criminal empire was staggering. They'd infiltrated city government, law enforcement, and the judicial system. Money laundering was just the beginning. They'd been involved in everything from drug trafficking to political corruption to contract killings. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, I emerged from a concealed exit behind a large headstone. Riverside Cemetery stretched out before me in the pre-dawn darkness. I found Grandma's mausoleum easily, a small marble structure with her name engraved above the entrance. The mausoleum next to it was unmarked but had a modern electronic lock. I tried Grandpa's birthday again, 0072848. The lock disengaged. Inside, the mausoleum had been converted into a high-tech safe house. Computer monitors lined the walls, displaying surveillance feeds from various locations around the city. File cabinets contained thousands of documents. A wall safe held stacks of cash, passports, and other identification documents. But the most shocking discovery was the wall covered in photographs. Surveillance shots of my entire extended family engaged in criminal activities. Drug deals, money transfers, meetings with known criminals. Even my cousin Derek, who I'd thought was just a harmless party boy, was photographed accepting briefcases full of cash. The evidence showed a criminal network spanning 3 states and involving dozens of people. Politicians, judges, police officers, business leaders, all connected to my family's operation. A red phone sat on the central desk. I picked it up, and it automatically dialed a number. "Agent Vance here. This is Catherine Morrison. My grandfather said to call you. Thank God. We've been waiting for your call. Are you safe? For now. But they're looking for me. We know. We've been monitoring their communications. A tactical team is already en route to your location." Agent Vance's voice was calm but urgent. "How much of the evidence have you accessed?" "I found some documents in the library safe and I'm in the mausoleum now. But the main evidence is still buried at the estate. Don't worry about that. We've been building a parallel case for 2 years. Your grandfather's evidence is the final piece we need, but we have enough to move forward either way." Through the surveillance monitors, I watched black vehicles surrounding the cemetery. But these weren't my family's SUVs. They were FBI tactical vehicles. "I can see you arriving," I told Agent Vance. "Good. Stay exactly where you are. We'll come to you." Within minutes, I heard a gentle knock on the mausoleum door. A woman in her 40s wearing an FBI windbreaker stood outside, flanked by 2 agents. "Catherine, I'm Patricia Vance. You're safe now." As we walked toward the waiting vehicles, Agent Vance explained what had been happening behind the scenes. "Your grandfather contacted us 3 years ago when he first discovered the money laundering. We've been working together ever since, gathering evidence and building a case. The fake will, the charity donation, the riddle on the cane, it was all part of an elaborate sting operation. So the $73 million really is going to charity? Eventually, yes. But first it's going to help us seize all of their criminal assets. We estimate the total value of their operation at over $400 million. I stopped walking. $400 million? Your family has been running one of the largest money laundering operations on the West Coast. The Children's Hospital donation was brilliant. It created a legal paper trail that exposes every dirty transaction they've made in the past 5 years. Agent Vance pulled out a tablet showing a complex organizational chart. Your Uncle Clifford wasn't just laundering money, he was coordinating distribution networks for 3 major drug cartels. Your Aunt Bernice was running the human trafficking operation through a network of fake charities and legitimate businesses. The chart showed connections I'd never imagined. Family businesses I'd thought were legitimate. Restaurants, real estate companies, shipping firms were all fronts for criminal activities. Your cousin Derek was handling weapons trafficking through his import-export business. Your other cousin Melissa was running illegal gambling operations through her catering company. Even your Aunt Helen was involved, using her accounting firm to create fake financial records. We reached the command vehicle just as sunrise painted the sky orange. Inside, dozens of agents were coordinating simultaneous raids across 3 states. "Where are they now?" I asked. Agent Vance pointed to a map covered in red pins. "We arrested your aunt and uncle at the estate 20 minutes ago. The rest of the network is being rounded up as we speak." On one of the monitors, I watched Bernice being led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. Clifford was shouting something about lawyers and constitutional rights, but the audio was muted. Seeing them in custody brought a mix of relief and sadness. These were people I'd shared holidays with, people who'd been part of my life for decades. Learning they were criminals was devastating enough, but knowing they'd killed Grandpa made it personal. What about Garrison? He's in protective custody. Turns out he's been our inside informant for the past year. When your grandfather realized he couldn't take down the operation alone, Garrison helped him contact us. So he was protecting me tonight? He was following your grandfather's emergency protocol. If anything happened to your grandfather before we could complete the operation, Garrison was supposed to guide you through the evidence collection process. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what Grandpa had orchestrated. He planned all of this, every detail. The cane, the riddles, the burial site, the tunnel system, even your personality profile. He studied your problem-solving methods for months to make sure you'd follow the clues correctly. Agent Vance handed me a thick folder. "This is for you, your grandfather's real will." I opened it with trembling hands. The document was brief but shocking. "To my beloved granddaughter Catherine, I leave my entire legitimate fortune, approximately $230 million, held in trust accounts that my criminal relatives never discovered. May you use this money to build a life free from the corruption that destroyed our family." $230 million? I whispered. Your grandfather was very good at keeping secrets. He created separate investment accounts decades ago, long before your aunt and uncle started their operation. They thought they were stealing from a $73 million estate, but they never found the real money. I thought about my tiny studio apartment, my student loans, the part-time job at the bookstore that barely covered rent. All this time, I'd been struggling financially while sitting on one of the largest fortunes in the state. "There's more," Agent Vance said gently. "Your grandfather also left detailed instructions for how he wanted the money used. Half goes to establishing a scholarship fund for students from low-income families. A quarter goes to anti-trafficking organizations. The remaining quarter is yours to do with as you please." I stared at the documents, trying to process the magnitude of what Grandpa had done. He'd turned his own family's greed against them, using their criminal enterprise to fund causes that fought against everything they represented. "He was a brilliant man," Agent Vance said, "and he loved you very much." Over the next several hours, I watched from the FBI command center as the operation unfolded. The coordination was extraordinary. Dozens of arrests happening simultaneously across 3 states, all timed to prevent the criminals from warning each other. Derek was arrested at his warehouse while overseeing a shipment of illegal weapons. Melissa was taken into custody at her catering company's offices, where agents found evidence of the gambling operations. Aunt Helen was arrested at her accounting firm, where computers contained detailed records of money laundering transactions. The scope went beyond my family. Corrupt police officers, bought judges, paid politicians, all were being rounded up as part of the operation. The criminal network had tentacles reaching into every level of government and law enforcement. "How long will the trials take?" I asked Agent Vance. "Years. This is one of the largest organized crime cases in the region's history. But with your grandfather's evidence and our undercover work, we have ironclad cases against all the major players." By noon, the scope of the conspiracy was clear. My family had been connected to drug cartels, human trafficking rings, and illegal weapons sales. They'd corrupted politicians, judges, and police officers. The investigation would take years to fully unravel, but the main players were already behind bars. "What happens to me now?" I asked Agent Vance. "Whatever you want. Your safety was our primary concern, but with the network dismantled, you're no longer in danger." She handed me a business card, though I'd recommend keeping a low profile for a while. Some of their associates are still out there. The business card was for a victim services coordinator. It hit me then that I was officially a victim of organized crime, someone whose family had been stolen from them by corruption and greed. 3 months later, I stood in the chapel at Riverside Cemetery for my grandfather's second funeral, a private ceremony for the man who'd saved my life and the lives of countless victims of his family's crimes. Garrison was there, fully recovered and helping coordinate the asset liquidation process. Agent Vance attended with several members of her team. A representative from the Children's Hospital came to thank me personally for the donation, but mostly it was just me saying goodbye to the grandfather I'd never fully understood until now. The first scholarship recipients were there too, 12 students from low-income families who would now be able to attend college because of Grandpa's sacrifice. Meeting them had been emotional, seeing the impact his plan would have on future generations. I'd moved out of my studio apartment into a modest house on the outskirts of town. Nothing flashy. I'd seen what money could do to families, but comfortable, safe, and private. The house had a library where I'd recreated Grandpa's chess set, positioning the pieces in the same sacrifice gambit configuration he'd shown me as a child. It served as a daily reminder of the lesson he'd taught me. Sometimes protecting what matters most requires sacrificing everything else. The scholarship fund was already helping 12 students attend college. The anti-trafficking organizations were using their donations to rescue victims and prosecute criminals. And I was slowly learning how to manage a fortune that I'd never asked for, but was determined to use responsibly. Working with the scholarship recipients had become my primary focus. Each student had a story of overcoming adversity, of fighting for opportunities that should have been their birthright. Their determination reminded me why Grandpa's sacrifice had been necessary. "Your grandfather would be proud," said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the scholarship program coordinator, as we reviewed applications for the next round of awards. "These students represent everything he believed in: intelligence overcoming circumstances, integrity triumphing over corruption." I'd also started working with the FBI's Victim Services Unit, helping other families who'd been destroyed by organized crime. The experience was therapeutic, turning my trauma into a tool for helping others. As I placed a white rose on Grandpa's grave, I thought about the cane that had started it all. The FBI had returned it after the trials ended, and it now sat in a place of honor in my library. The riddle carved into the wood had faded slightly, but I could still read the words that had changed my life. More importantly, I understood now that the riddle wasn't just about finding hidden treasure. It was about finding the courage to do what's right, even when the cost is everything you thought you knew about your own family. I plan to keep it in a place of honor, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as worthless trinkets, and that true family isn't defined by blood, but by the people willing to sacrifice everything to protect those they love. The trials had been difficult to watch. Seeing Bernice and Clifford in orange jumpsuits, hearing the evidence of their crimes, watching them try to justify murdering their own father, it had been heartbreaking and infuriating in equal measure. Bernice received life in prison without parole for her role in multiple murders and human trafficking operations. Clifford got the same sentence for drug trafficking and conspiracy to commit murder. Derek, Melissa, and Helen received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. But the most satisfying conviction was for Grandpa's murder. The FBI had found traces of the poison in tissue samples taken during his autopsy, and phone records showed Bernice and Clifford coordinating with the assassin on the day he died. During victim impact statements, I'd addressed the court directly. My grandfather spent his final years orchestrating one of the most complex justice operations in the state's history, all because he discovered that the people he loved most had become the very evil he'd spent his life fighting against. These defendants didn't just commit crimes, they betrayed the most fundamental bonds of family and trust. The judge had been visibly moved by the case. In 30 years on the bench, I've never seen such a systematic betrayal of family trust combined with such elaborate criminal activity. The defendants showed no mercy to their victims, including their own father, and they deserve none from this court. A year after the arrests, I received a letter from one of the trafficking victims the operation had rescued. Maria Elena Santos was 19, originally from Guatemala, and had been forced into prostitution by the network Bernice had been running. "I wanted to thank you," she wrote in careful English. "Because of your grandfather's courage and your bravery in finding the evidence, I am free now. I am in school, learning to be a nurse so I can help other people who have been hurt like me. Your family's money is helping me build a new life. I know your grandfather would be proud of what you have done with his gift." Reading that letter, I finally understood why Grandpa had been willing to sacrifice everything. It wasn't just about stopping criminals. It was about saving lives, giving people like Maria Elena a chance at freedom and dignity. The ripple effects of the operation continued to unfold. Corrupt officials were being removed from office. New oversight procedures were being implemented. Victim services programs were being expanded with funding from the seized assets. The riddle carved into that wooden stick had led me to more than just hidden treasure. It had revealed the truth about good and evil, loyalty and betrayal, and the power of one person's determination to make things right. Grandpa had always said I had the sharpest mind in the family. He just never told me I'd need to use it to destroy the family itself. As I walked away from the cemetery, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The weight of responsibility that comes with genuine power, and the freedom that comes from using it for the right reasons. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a conference on organized crime. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of law enforcement officials, prosecutors, and victim advocates, I thought about how far I'd come from that night in my studio apartment when I first noticed the ridges on Grandpa's cane. "My grandfather taught me that puzzles aren't just intellectual exercises," I told the audience. "They're training for life. The most important problems we face don't come with instruction manuals. We have to figure them out ourselves, piece by piece, clue by clue." After my speech, a young FBI agent approached me. "I wanted to thank you. Your grandfather's case has become a model for how to investigate complex family-based criminal organizations. We're teaching his methods at the academy now." The cane had been carved with a riddle, but Grandpa himself had been the real puzzle. A man who'd spent his final years orchestrating one of the most complex justice operations in FBI history, all to ensure that his granddaughter could inherit not just money, but a chance at a life free from the corruption that had consumed everyone else he'd ever loved. I drove home thinking about the future, the students who would attend college because of his sacrifice, the victims who would be rescued by the organizations he'd funded, and the criminals who would face justice because of evidence he'd spent years gathering. The will had indeed been a distraction, but the real inheritance wasn't hidden in a buried box or a secret mausoleum. It was the knowledge that sometimes the people we love most are willing to become puzzle makers and secret keepers, riddle carvers and fortune hiders, all to ensure that when the truth finally emerges, justice and love triumph over greed and corruption. That night, I found one final letter from Grandpa hidden in the house's mail slot. It was dated just weeks before his death. "My darling Catherine, if you're reading this, then you've successfully solved the greatest riddle of all: how to choose integrity over easy money, justice over family loyalty, and truth over comfortable lies. The fortune you've inherited is nothing compared to the character you've shown. Use both wisely. The raven has found its way home. Your grandpa, who loved you enough to become a stranger." I folded the letter carefully and placed it next to the space where his cane would sit when it was finally returned to me. Outside, rain began to fall on the garden where I'd planted a small oak tree in his memory. In time, it would grow large enough to provide shade for future generations, who would hopefully never need to solve riddles carved in wood or follow coordinates to buried secrets. But if they ever did, I hoped they would have the courage to see the puzzle through to the end, just as Grandpa had taught me to do all those summers when we sat together in his library, playing chess and solving riddles, neither of us knowing that he was preparing me for the most important game of my life, the game where the prize wasn't money or property, but the chance to emerge from a corrupted family's legacy with clean hands and a clear conscience. I'd won that game, but only because Grandpa had spent his final years ensuring I had all the right pieces. The riddle on the cane had been simple, really. It just took me a while to understand that the answer wasn't a location or a combination of numbers. The answer was trust. Trust that the person who carved those words loved me enough to risk everything, including his own life, to give me a fighting chance at something better than the legacy our family name had earned. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since his funeral, dreaming of ravens and oak trees, hidden treasures and honest fortunes, and the grandfather who taught me that the most valuable inheritance isn't what you receive, but what you choose to do with it.